about the movement that we have as a people. This is not the last moment. This is the last idea that you should have about moving this entire community forward. Joining me is my co-host and always someone concerned, an epidemiologist, Dr. Kenyatta. Steve,
Hi,
how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I mean, it's a
Yes.
beautiful day. Everyone's excited. I'm excited about the idea. For all those who are agonizing, don't. We're
Right.
definitely seeking more than just this election. Uh,
hmm
you've got a great representation, aka Howard alum. How's it feel?
It's actually great. And Howard's president, we had like a live at 11 o'clock today, just kind of talking about the historic moment and just Howard alumni that have contributed to just the political field. So of course we recognized Senator Harris, my soror and fellow Howard alum, and it's just a great day. It's a great feeling, and just to be able to vote and to contribute to this moment, it's major. So really excited.
The other thing is, we just cannot afford to let our guard down. I want the community to vote for, um, not letting your guard down. Vote for staying vigilant during Corona. Just a historical. The Spanish flu lasted how long compared to where we have been in this pandemic?
So if I remember correctly, we are in the early stages. So the Spanish flu lasted about 2 to 3 years. And so even after there was somewhat of semblance of control, people were still required to wear a mask when they went out. And so that's the big difference with this current pandemic and the Spanish flu, uh 1918, is like they had no problems doing it. Right now, I don't know what's going on in America. Clearly, we've outpaced everybody. And when you look at the per capita of countries like India compared to us, and we're still number one. And about 2 months ago, there was a model projecting that India would pass us because, I mean, India's population is probably 4 or 5 times that of the US. And so they were pretty much like on target to pass the US the end of October. But guess what? People got comfortable. There were stories of, we're turning a corner. I don't know what corner we turned, but it wasn't for COVID. And so the mask wearing just kind of like dwindled and people were gathering, and we're still number one. And I think we have like 1 million cases more than India right now. And at the rate that we're going with our daily case counts, we're still going to be number one. And it's crazy because we're not that densely populated as India.
So when
But
you think about what's at risk, the election is happening, but what are your health concerns for our community? What are we still not getting? What are we not readjusting, given we're about 6 months into a real full blown pandemic and we really have to assess our health situation now? What hasn't changed?
so what hasn't changed is pre-existing conditions. If you have any pre-existing conditions, when you think about asthma, diabetes, and there's been a push for opening schools, and I'm like, why would you want and to send our kids back to school? And they're like, oh, our kids are at a disadvantage because they're at home, so they're not getting these additional resources. But guess what? Our kids are number one for diabetes, childhood diabetes. They're number one for childhood asthma. They're number one for sickle cell. So why they wouldn't, most of our kids wouldn't be able to attend school anyway because they have pre-existing conditions that would definitely make them susceptible to COVID. So those are the things that we aren't talking about, but they're there. The fact that wearing a mask, just because you wear a mask And that was something that we brought up earlier today. If the people around you aren't wearing masks, you're still putting yourself at risk. So it's just like being like inhaling secondary smoke, because the person who's smoking the cigarette has a filter on their cigarette, right? So we're getting all the secondhand smoke, and that's why deaths from secondhand smoking is sometimes higher as well. So those are the things that we have to think about. We can't be selfish, first of all. And we just have to understand that we were already disproportionately affected health-wise in the minority community. So we can't afford to let our guard down. We can't afford to have COVID fatigue or this pandemic, fatigue and whatever else they've called it. We have to be vigilant, because at the end of the day, whoever's elected, the current sitting president still has not provided what his healthcare plan is going to be if reelected. So we are no better off than before the pandemic started. We're actually in a worse place because we're the most affected. So at the end of the day, we have to be very vigilant. After today, we need to really go to our local senators and local government and demand change for health. And it's like the American Public Health Association president said, voting, the act of voting is a public health intervention, because you can put people in office that actually cares about your health. And that's something that we need to start associating with our health. Our health is not just a medical issue, it's a political issue at this point.
So when you imagine the community getting better, what are we missing when you see individuals still being turned up, when you still see even African Americans, Blacks, not wearing masks in public places, not walking in stores with masks, not covering up? What are we missing, and what are they not thinking about as it relates to they come back home and they don't live at home and they have been in the club?
So that's a loaded question. First of all, I'll throw it out there, but it's just so much that's being missed, because there's that comfort or that assumption that just because a place is open, that is safe. And that's not true. These people are trying to make money. And if you're not that concerned with your health or those around you, that you would go to the club and all these other house parties, and I'm like, these events that are happening, I'm like, really, this is going on right now. And so it's baffling to me. I have these conversations all day. And the other thing is, you don't think about what you're taking to your home, because again, you can't see COVID. And you could be, an asymptomatic carrier, or you could be infected and not have an active infection yet to the point where you're showing symptoms, and go visit grandma or grandpa or, your aunt or whatever, and you've exposed them. And there are so many cases that I've heard of that happening, where there was a great grandson that went and visited his great grandparents. His roommate had been out doing whatever, even though he was pretty much trying to stay home, but the roommate was positive. The roommate got his results on a Monday. The great grandson had visited his grandparents that previous the Sunday, the day before. So he visited them during an active period, and then later he turned up being positive. So just think about the fragile nature of exposing your great grandparents, because you're taking the word of your roommate that they're doing what they're supposed to do, and they're not. They're out clubbing, and they're bringing that back home to you, and then you're taking it out to your loved ones, even if you're trying to do the right thing. So that's what's missing. It's like, we have to think about the extended effects of our behavior. We can't be selfish.
So when it comes to finding our community's new agenda, what would be some of the top three? We've got, we've got the I think social criminal justice reform is pretty easy. We know that's on the docket. When we think of change, what are your top three in addition, to criminal justice reform?
So my top three would be, of course, equitable access to care. We need it's one thing to provide the health insurance, which is also on the list, like not just access to care, but actually insurance and having places, because most people pretty much think access to care is like being able to get to a hospital or being able to see a doctor. But it goes beyond that to, okay, so if I have this insurance, how do I make sure that I'm seeing someone that, appropriate for my condition? Because we hear the stories, when you read about in the New York Times that Black babies do better when they're treated by Black doctors, so just think about that. So access to care to people who look like us and understand our culture, because there are cultural differences that affect how we're treated in the healthcare system as well. So it's just that. And also just bringing public health back to the communities. Remember, doctors used to make house calls. Hey, we have like the virtual visits now, but there's still like that the technological divide when it comes to like even just being able to see your doctor during a pandemic if you don't have a device or if you actually don't have internet. So we need to have something in place where doctors can actually start making house calls, particularly if you have a critical patient. So those are, I guess, and maybe more than three. I lost count, but
You're about it too.
we have to get back to that, and just the mental health. Black people, we've suffered mentally, and then when we don't know how to deal with our loved ones that are having the mental breakdowns or like the mental issues, and the police come, and then we're seeing the outcome of that is death. So there needs to be some type of legislation where if someone is having a mental health issue, the police shouldn't be called. There should be some other type of law enforcement or group or division that's created to handle that, or to have some type of training, or to ride along with police officers just to assess the situations, because not every situation is just someone resisting arrest and need to be shot 7 times.
Yeah, it seems to be a real issue, obviously, criminal justice. When you think about education, it definitely is paramount. And that includes a different type of occupational focus, science-based intervention.
Absolutely. I mean, there are so many facets to health and public health. I'm a public health advocate at the end of the day, and that entails just so many things, and that goes from like the mental health to community health to global health. I mean, it's environmental health. Think about Flint. That's another issue that we've still left on the table. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we can't just get over the moment. So with all the protests and everything that's happened during this pandemic, and then now our focus has shifted once again to the election. So, okay, so after this election is over, no matter the outcome, is that focus going to reshift back to those things that we've left on the table?
I think the conversation and the reason we're talking now is because I don't want my community to think the election is over and you still aren't voting for yourself. Absolutely. And I think you gotta vote for yourself in behavior. And many would wonder why you and I dialogue, but the dialogue is about community hearing conversations that really make health a priority. It just cannot be a secondary experience.
It really can't. And then when like think about the stress that comes from where if you are in a better position as a person and as an individual, then that's less stress on your body. And because the more stress you have, the more susceptible you are to disease. And I spoke to a group, I think last week or the week before, and that was one of the things because they were talking about what does self-care mean and what does self-care look like. And self-care is whatever de-stresses you. I don't even know if that's the word, but whatever takes the stress out of your life is self-care, because then you can work on those things like the other healthy behaviors, whether it's mental, physical, financial health is important. You know, like there's so many aspects to health, especially in the minority community, that's being overlooked.
I think that the when you say it overlooked, I think it's just in the conversation. Like I'm trying to figure out one popular song that really focused on our health.
Yeah,
Uh,
no.
so the one song that comes to me is "Don't Push Me, I'm So Close to the Edge," and it was one of those things where you could find it. Uh,
Yeah.
you know,
But think about how long ago that song came out. Like what, I mean, was that even in this century? Think about it. And so that just goes to show that the actual conscience of our people is not really centered around health. So we have to figure out like what has our focus shifted to make us not want to be the best version of ourselves, because that consciousness that we saw in the 70s, where did that go?
well, hopefully we've resurrected some of that right about now. For all of you out there, obviously Indiana came in red. I don't think anybody saw Indiana doing anything but being red. Drove through Indiana twice. Nobody was wearing a mask. I'm good.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah. So no surprise there. Really not a conversation. Everybody, we still have more. I just want to make sure we're having a conversation about ourselves and not getting caught in the fog of what is here. We all must stay engaged during and beyond this movement. So I think you're talking about it.
And that's the important thing, because what we've seen in our minority communities is like once the hype is gone, you know, it's not talked about anymore. And
Right.
we have to get past that as a people. What we're experiencing right now goes beyond a social media post or you know, a moment to just take a picture with someone that you've seen, like a famous person. Like we have to get beyond those moments, and we have to actually take a self-assessment and ask ourselves, have I done my best? Like what have I done to be an agent of change? And it doesn't have to be anything on a large scale. It can be like something small. Did I have the opportunity to take someone to the polls or help someone fill out their absentee ballot? Have I checked on my neighbors?
Yeah, I think that you're right there. I think the neighbor checking, I think even being a good person, or for me, I think the advent of skill set acquisition. You're in a pandemic. How important is it to learn how to do um, contract tracing?
Yeah, it's a free course at this point.
Yeah,
Mhm.
free course, but can you get paid after you know what you're doing?
Absolutely. I mean, companies reach out to me all the time for referrals. Like, you know, they're bidding for contracts for contact tracing. And you don't have to have a public health background. But unfortunately, so many people got caught up in the extra money for unemployment that wasn't palatable. It's like, oh, but it was an opportunity that could go beyond that moment. And now that they're you're not getting that extra, or you've exhausted your unemployment, now what? And so we have to get beyond that quick money. Like, oh, this is good money, I'm doing this. But what did you do? How did you change your life with that extra money? Did you spend it all? Did you hop on one of these planes and expose yourself to go somewhere? Because I saw the pictures and I saw the video. So now what?
Yeah, it's a real consideration on what it is. I'm just hoping that all of us are push the reset on how we approach voting and staying engaged.
Yeah, I don't think the reset button has been pushed, Monson. I think it was a distraction, a simple distraction that continued to get us off course. Because at the end of the day, like, yeah, so, there are moratoriums on the evictions and all of that. But when that ends, what are you going to do beyond that? Like, are you thinking beyond that next move? So, okay, you're here, you're good with a place to stay. So, but then when that ends, what do you plan to do? So we have to be forward thinkers. We can't just be in the moment. And I think all of this that has happened did not push people past the moment.
Well, I think the idea, how do we get past that moment? Like, you're asking a question. Well, what would make someone want to understand and know contract tracing? And then how can they evolve that job?
So basically, there are several free courses out there. You can actually learn how the contact tracing, because that's going to be big, especially as the numbers continue to increase. And guess what? You can get a couple of your friends together and you can go after, because they're still giving out money for small businesses. So start your own contact tracing business. You'll have your certificate and it's basically guaranteed work at this point. So we have to see beyond this moment, and we can't give up on what we can't really see. We have to, I will say that in this current moment, lifetime, that we've lost visionaries, the forward thinkers. You have to be able to see beyond your current situation. And I don't know if it's like the mental health component that have put people in a situation where they feel like they're stuck, but you have to constantly evolve and keep moving past where you are, because this is all temporary. Change is inevitable. And if you've been laid off, how do you plan to get past that?
All right, for all of you who want to know, we've got Keith and State Representative Stovall live here. How are you, Representative?
I am well. How about yourself?
Coming on a seat at the table, you and obviously our editor at large there, Keith, is out there with you. What does it feel like? Will Georgia flip to blue?
I don't know. I'm an independent candidate for U.S. Senate, so either way, it's fine with me because I'm in the middle.
Either way you win.
Yes. So I'm a current.
What is the mood of our community? What have you seen at the polls today? And congratulations on your effort. We need more sisters pushing the agenda, being leaders. Can you share a part of what your agenda was for our community and what we need to know about the importance of being present and local races?
Yes, so I'm a current state representative And I ran off the basis of 8/30/30. I had 8 years as a legislator in the state house, working nonpartisan across the aisle to pass some meaningful legislation. 30 years as a small business owner and 30 years of bringing resources to the community. And so my platform was pretty simple. It was economic opportunity, which is reforming our education system and ensuring that every high school student graduates with a certification in a trade, and then small businesses. So changing our classification on the federal level so that micro small businesses can be able to protect and get all the resources they're gonna need, because they're the ones who are the backbone of our communities. They're the ones that are hiring the individuals that are now unemployed. And so, and then when you look at government efficiency, making sure we have a fiscally sound government that includes making sure we have health care that's affordable and quality infrastructure with our broadband that's definitely needed, reforming our justice system and immigration. And then lastly is global stewardship, improving our international trade relations that we have, and also looking at our environmental sustainability for the future.
Dr. Stevens, how can local representatives help us with this COVID? What do we anticipate that we need between you two ladies? What can we do to address this COVID issue in Georgia, where obviously the leadership has taken a concentrated effort to not have mass being
So
Uh, Go ahead.
we definitely need to identify the zip codes or the areas that are hotspots, and they are there. And then we need to mobilize like the testing and build that trust in the community to let them know, like, hey, we're not just leaving you out here. We want to make sure that you have the resources and that you're being tested and that you are able to receive tests, that we're not giving you anything, or, like I've heard so much from these communities that I've gone into, and they're saying they don't even trust the testing. But we definitely have to build that trust in the communities once again, whether it's using the schools or churches or whatever. But we have to be able to control the spread of the virus in these communities that are hotspots, and that's like the most needed concern right
Representative, how can we support our community? Because we clearly have a situation even after election as it relates to our community and COVID.
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Stevens. I believe I heard the name correctly. I definitely agree with that. There's a lot of mistrust in our communities when it comes down to COVID and testing. There's also, even when you think about the contact tracing that was being done in the communities. And then when you think about the essential workers who are having to go to work, and many of them are going into workplaces that are not safe, and they have not been providing the personal equipment like they're supposed to. And then the workers are left with, I have to go to work. Who do I report that to? And if that happens to me. So there are a lot of dynamics that are going on here in Georgia, and I know we definitely have now seen cases on the rise here in Georgia. So we continue to educate our community to let them know that even though they might see one thing, but we really have to make sure we stay vigilant when it comes down to fighting COVID-19.
Well, I want to thank you, Keith. Check back in with us in 30 minutes. Best wishes to you, Representative. I look forward, and thank you for your continued involvement and leadership in our community.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Keith. Check back in 30 minutes. Good.
All right. I'll talk to y'all soon.
Thank you, Keith. Great job.
Thank you.
Yeah, real, a lot of movement from ladies running for office.
Yeah, and I I'm just gonna say, because most people trust women. Sorry, it is what it is at this moment, because especially in minority communities, like most of the homes are basically ran by women. So when it comes to looking to someone that can help mitigate some of the issues that we're facing in our communities, that's the first, the person that they turn to. I mean, it's sad to say, but that's where we are right now.
I think so. When we think about it, I know we've got Felicia Davis coming on from RU Vote Ready, so we can talk about what it is and what's happening with the Black Women's Coalition Roundtable. Trust. What should we be trusting right now during COVID, and how can we position ourselves to trust the future? What should we be putting our trust in? And what do you see on the agenda that we need to change what we're trust is, even in as we get our news and information about who we are?
So, good evening. Glad to be on. We're just now closing down our Get Out the Vote operation. And I think exit polls are going to show that COVID is a major issue for our community. And we're very knowledgeable about the fact that we are disproportionately impacted. It tells us that we just can't trust anybody with any virus. And we're often the guinea pigs for what might work. So we're looking to places like Morehouse School of Medicine, Howard University School of Medicine, Meharry, and really trusted scientists and physicians in our community and researchers that are really going to lead the way, I think, for the Black community specifically. But we will need people to volunteer for trials. But I think we're guiding people to follow our academic institutions that are trusted voices in our community.
Dr. Stevens?
Yes, that's true. So some of the vaccine makers have reached out to HBCUs. All of the HBCUs with the School of Medicine has received money for basically recruitment for the vaccine trials. However, I think there's still going to be that challenge because I know that some of the schools have received backlash for, the president's posting, the university president's posting that, we should participate in these vaccine trials. However, as a scientist, like before I was an epidemiologist, I actually worked in the lab at Emory School of Medicine. I did cancer research. And when you know all the details that goes into creating a vaccine and the Black community isn't, doesn't have a deaf ear to that. And so essentially we have to get to a point where we can't be like on the first round because, it takes 18 months to get like a stable vaccine. And so everything that was saying, like, we were supposed to have a vaccine by today, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And guess what? We don't have one because it's not possible. And a lot of the leaders in vaccine development have actually had to pull their vaccines from the from their trials because of the side effects that they're seeing and just some of the I guess the adverse events that patients they didn't expect, but they may be anomalies, but they're there, so you have to pull it. And so Black people generally, we don't want to be that. We've had from Henrietta Lacks to the Tuskegee experiment, like we want to know that we can trust it. And even when it goes to I don't even think, and as a Howard grad, and I have friends who work in vaccine development, and they're saying like there's just that distrust because of how it's been presented to the Black community on top of that. And there are some Black people that rolled up their sleeves and were some of the first ones to actually, get in these trials. But I think as a whole, the Black people won't have that level of trust until more data is there. And so we're lacking data at this point.
Ms. Davis, tell us what you see. We obviously know AP is early. 13 electric votes going for Trump. These are not surprise states by any means. What was the mood of voting today? What kind of voter turnout do we anticipate that we had here in Georgia?
So my folks worked all in Clayton County, which is a large, predominantly Black county. It was slow but steady all day with moments, lots of excitement. There were quite a few first-time voters. We were taking exit polls. More than 1,000 people took the exit poll and they were excited to take it. So they not only stopped, they would actually come back to make sure they took the poll. So there is an enthusiasm about the vote. And we had a couple of young people, a couple of 19-year-olds working with us who also voted for the first time. And the enthusiasm and the connection of the vote to the agenda was powerful to see in action. So my expectation, as we've talked with people all across the country, of course, we have coordinators in Alabama, Mississippi, Florida, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan. And so there have been a few shenanigans in different places, but it seems that the Black community specifically has been persistent. We believe there's been a very large early vote, significant absentee vote, and we had a steady flow today on the last opportunity to get in. So I am optimistic. Certainly, I work in a nonpartisan hat. So what I can say is the Black turnout appears to be strong.
That's exciting. There were quite a few opportunities, obviously, even in Georgia, for a possibility of a Black senator. What does this represent? Can Georgia go blue?
Well, again, from a nonpartisan perspective, what I will say is that we have 2 Senate races, which is unique. It also attracts a lot of resources and a lot of energy. I think people have been better educated about the need to vote down ballot. And however, in one Senate race, I think we have 20 plus candidates. And Georgia requires that you get to that 50 plus, 50 plus 1 in order to win. So it's very likely that in one of the races, there may be a runoff, but we are very confident that the runoff will be between at least a Democrat. And it appears that Warnock is the leading Democrat, and it's not clear of the Republicans. So I know that people in the campaign certainly still have high expectation of turning the entire state blue. It is possible, but with so many candidates in one race, the other race is fewer candidates, and so it's possible that there could be a victory in that race. But we work in a nonpartisan mode. We try to get Black people out to vote no matter who they're voting for, and think that the best things will happen in that way.
Super. Well, we appreciate you checking in, and you're going to check back with us in about another 30, 40 minutes.
I will, and I will be rounding up people. I heard really great things in Mississippi and some good news out of Florida. So I'm rounding up some of my colleagues between now and the next 30 minutes. Cool.
Well, we look forward to you checking back in. Thank you so much, Ms. Davis.
Thank you for having me.
So, Ty, exciting moment. Obviously, you're talking about Raphael Warnock, positioned to possibly be in a runoff, if not win it outright, but definitely a new look for Georgia. What do you think about how Georgia, even South Carolina, were beginning to look as it relates to now more Black possible senators than since Reconstruction?
Is that for me?
That's you. We're the only ones here now.
I know. I'm like looking at CNN and listening to you. Sorry, but I think it's critical, and it goes back to what we were talking about before about having the representation and the people that have the experiences of the people. And so when you have elected officials that haven't had to like really suffer through anything or understand the culture of the minority community, then they tend not to really fight for issues of that community. So when you look at these races with these Democratic, that to have possible Democratic senators, first of all, and then for them to be Black, that's major because it gives the Black community a sense that, okay, I have representation. I see someone that looks like me, and now I can go and express the issues of the community to these people, because I've heard so much when working in community health that what's the point of going to, you know, the leadership, my representative or my senator, because they don't care, because they don't understand. And so when you have someone that looks like them, it kind of takes away some of that they don't understand. Like it makes them more relatable. So hopefully that will give the actual voters in that community, like for those districts, the opportunity to actually take their issues to the representatives and to these senators and say, hey, we got you in here. And so this is what we need to happen in our respective communities. And so that's what needs to happen. Whatever, you know, the results are from this election tonight, those are some of the things that need to happen moving forward. So it's great if we have like the Black elected senators or just, you know, Democrats in general for seats that have been flipped, but we have to start advocating for our health. It doesn't matter who is in office at that point. So that's one of the things that the Black community and other minority communities, we tend not to advocate for ourselves because we feel like the persons in power don't care or they can't relate to our issues. Did I answer your question?
You answered my question. I just want the community to really think about that there's a movement and we need to be part of it. And health is clearly a priority. So look, at most of the polls, I think we're still got tons to deal with. I think part of the shenanigans, even in mainstream media, is that they have to titillate and stimulate for what will not be good results for at least a few more hours, as the results are barely in on most races, and then in places where there is really just no surprise. So,
yeah, I was watching earlier how the prediction was that you know, the current president has to win like the Midwest, like the Illinois and Michigan and states around that area. And I'm like, the way the Illinois cases have increased. You know, Georgia was number 5 in the nation for COVID cases for a long time. The past 3 weeks, now Illinois has like just sped past Georgia for the number 5 spot. And unless Georgia continues, like just everybody's having like a house party every day and the numbers like skyrocket, we still won't catch up to Illinois. And that should be enough for them to have voted the current president out just for mishandling the pandemic alone.
Well, I think Illinois is pretty blue.
Yeah.
They have not put out the welcome mat several times.
Yeah. And the comments that he's made about the state.
Yeah. And Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And, you know, those are places that have been rich in their Blue heritage, but obviously they wanted to be like Mikey and try it. You might like it. So now we tried it and we figured out, at least some of us, that we did not like it. I never tried it, so it wasn't something for me.
Yeah, it was not palatable. So
No,
not at all.
not palatable, not open, not many things like that.
Absolutely. So, I mean, those are, and you know, even just with Georgia, I know they're talking about Georgia is one of like the key states to watch because our polls close early, and the last election, the current president didn't even have to basically campaign in Georgia because it was like easy. But you know, he's been here a few times because I mean he's scared. He's scared, and that's a good sign. But as I always tell people, Georgia is more than just Metro Atlanta. So that's something that we definitely have to keep in mind as the numbers are rolling in. But you know, if Georgia turns blue, I would be surprised. That would be a miracle. But being that the CDC is here in Atlanta, and I know a lot of the distrust that has been put into that agency as a result of the current sitting president, if the CDC employees alone all over the state, you know, voted him out, that would be major. Because to once be a part of an institution that was highly recognized throughout the world, and to be relegated to just some benign agency that can't even move or collect data, make any reports without, you know, like going through the White House, which is crazy because it's the premier public health institution. Everyone always looked to the CDC. And, you know, to have and it's not even that it's not power, but just to have that stature taken away. And so it has really just taken the wind out of a lot of the employees there. So, you know, that's something that we have to keep in mind too, where we didn't have to be here, especially in Georgia. We didn't have to be here
a long time ago, but there was nothing to suggest that anybody was paying attention.
Oh yeah, I was on that bandwagon months ago.
I think you've continued to say that. Not certain that independence, even with the level of insecurity. I mean, people really through the fact that you can't see COVID. The fact that it requires you to have a behavior that none of us are comfortable it's to isolating. I mean, like literally isolating is part of the program. Like what's necessary and essential. And in the conversation, I think it gets lost because everybody wants to be titillated and entertained, and yet this is a moment for us to be deeper in what our history is. This is a moment for us to study our history. This is for us to understand what Black philosophers were saying, what we could learn from our history of our ancestors here. This is that moment. So did you use that moment to grow in your knowledge? Did you read about the forming of the universities, HBC universities? You know, it's that moment for us to really understand.
We missed the moment. Clearly the numbers show we missed that moment, and it's crazy to think that we're number one in the world for cases and deaths. That hasn't changed. So clearly that moment has been missed. And then to not have a leadership that acts collectively. Because if one state says, oh, well, you have to wear a mask and, you know, you can't do X, Y, Z. But the neighboring states are like, oh, we don't believe in that and we don't care. So if someone wants to go party, they just go to a neighboring state and then they go back home. And so whatever they've gotten from that state, they just take it back home.
Yeah. So what do you think are the young organizers? I mean, you've seen them out there. They're on the front line. Should masks be made mandatory for all people who are really there? If so, why?
Yes, masks should definitely be made mandatory. And just in Georgia alone, that 18 to 29 age group have the highest numbers of COVID. And that's over like 90,000 cases, and it's on the rise. And the crazy thing is their deaths are low because they're taking it home to their parents and grandparents. And so those deaths are increasing.
All right. Reporting live from DC, host of Nothing New Under the Sun, Ms. Cora Berry. We are definitely talking about the election. We want to know what's going on from DC. Joining me and Dr. Kenyatta Steele. Obviously, Cora Masters Berry, Nothing New Under the Sun. It's a big day in DC. Let us know what's going on.
Well, hello everybody, and
Hi.
I guess this is going to be can you hear me? Because
We
I'm at a
can.
restaurant. I'm having an after poll party, which is really just eating dinner. But we were out all evening going to the different polls in the DMV, and actually it was very slow. I was anticipating a lot of it I've been seeing a week, but it seems like most people already did their voting. So it was a steady stream, but it was not a line. We were giving out, snack bags, but what I've been told, though, that's not bad news because a lot of people in record numbers voted by mail or voted early. So, and I hear that that's pretty much the trend in a lot of other parts of the country because I've been checking in with the National Coalition and they seem like the biggest vote really has come. I'm trying not to follow the national trend right now. It's hard not to because, well, it's hard not to, but I'm turning my back on it because it'll give you a heart attack. But right now, like Biden's up by 1 point in Florida, and I can just go down the list, but all that's going to change in an hour. So it's a little early to call it, except that I think that the historic vote that we saw in the last couple of weeks has really shown itself in terms of the election results. And I don't have any intel that the red wave that was supposed to take place on election day actually did. So I'm encouraged. I always knew as a political scientist, when you increase that level of, voting participation, it's hard to overcome in one day what's been going on for 2 weeks. So I already could read the tea leaves, and as a microscopic example, microcosmic example, my brother, Bishop Thomas Masters, was the mayor of Riviera Beach. It's pretty much a pretty dominantly Black town in Florida, South Florida. And they're getting out the vote. The Biden people are down on the floor, on the ground strong. But he sent to me a video of at least 5 people that he took to the polls that had never voted in their entire life. So I look at that and extrapolate that to the larger population. That's symbolic. You saw that when Barack ran the first time. My 97-year-old mother went to the polls and voted because he was a Black president, but a lot of people voted for the first time. I'm seeing that here. That's happening. So the acceleration of the vote is not just the enthusiasm people have of making their voice heard, but also people who understand the importance of voting to the extent that they are voting for the first time. So something is moving them, and I'm confident that that's going to go throughout the evening.
I think it's important. Obviously, you're a political strategist. You have definitely run the most successful get out to vote campaign in our community's history. What are some of the other young ladies that are in your Nothing New Under the Sun? You have Tamika, you've got Melody Campbell. What are these young ladies saying about what's going on, where they are?
Well, I spoke to Tamika this morning, who was on her way from, I think, Cincinnati and on her way to Michigan, on her way to Detroit. But she had boots on the ground there even when she wasn't there. And she was telling me about the amazing voter suppression that was taking place there. But that, again, like in the 60s, they turned a lot of people away yesterday, but they doubled back and came back. And so they're there all day when I heard from her later fighting voter suppression. So I don't know how that all turns out, but the most important thing that she gave us was that the voter suppression, instead of intimidating the voters, made them double down. I just got off the phone with Natalie, and they're paying close attention because they expect that what's happening, what will happen in the next hour is going to tell the story. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I like what you're saying other than that voter suppression, but that's no surprise. It seemed like there's been voter suppression all over the country, and we have still risen to this. I mean, we have seen it. I think on your show, you have had individuals share, from the poll tax to individuals that came on your show and truly shared historically, this is nothing new. We know that they will suppress. We know that that is part of the reason that we all should gain strength from what our community has gone through. So not surprised.
Yeah, and then like I said before, I likened it to in the 60s when they had dogs, cattle prods, and water holes, and they said, they would come back and say again, before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go home to my Lord and be free. That is what I see in the attitude of our people now in 2020. The more they suppress, the more we push back. And that is the spirit that is pervading across the country. You've seen groups of fraternity and sororities, what they call the Divine Nine, marching together. I mean, as long as the line can see, with common t-shirts on. I've never seen that before. So there's a phenomenon that's going on in this country that has been going on for the last few weeks that I don't think that that can be ignored. And as a matter of fact, I think it's fortuitous.
Yeah, you see Dr. Stevens has on her pearls and her pink and green. She's a PhD, Howard graduate, and obviously AKA. So she is definitely part of that Divine Nine, and we've talked about that. But winning with women, you have women pushing forward. I've got 3 women. Why don't you share with us about winning with women, and all of you, just the whole role that women have played during this election?
This organization started very organically. The person who drives the organization is a young woman named Joteka Eddy. And this organization, why don't we want to call it an organization? Because we don't have a charter or a mission statement. We just come together. But it's intergenerational, which makes it so special. And the ages run from 21 to 94. And on a weekly from 8:30 until 10:30 and sometime 11. And then after that, because they get chatty, young people get chatty. The old folks get off the phone. But it's me in terms of the elders, Johnetta Cole, in New York, Hazel Dukes. Yesterday, Oprah was on with us. The week before, Waters was on there. Before then, it was Kathy Hughes. It was Joy Reid. About 200 or 300 women that get on. Star Jones. Then we've raised almost $500,000 to do things. We were the driving force, and I take that. We were the driving force to getting and pushing the pressure on Biden to have an African-American woman as his running mate. And the day that he made that announcement, it was such a kinetic day for us because we had been so in the weeds that within 2 hours, she sent out a call. Within 2 hours, you had 300 women on the phone talking about it, crying, celebrating. It was a historic moment. It was a carotid moment, as they would say, and my pastor Willie Wilson would say. So, and you know, we've pushed out when we heard that Biden had put somebody up in Los Angeles against Maxine. We pushed out and raised a few $1,000s for her, a lot of money, and put out a letter to all her an advocacy group that is there's older women and younger women, public women, Donna Brazile, many more. And there are women who are corporate people. It's a mixed mass of Black women who have discovered, understand, and are leveraging their power for the greater good of our community.
That's beautiful. Dr. Stevens, winning with women. It is the moment for women. And you see intergenerational. So you two ladies, both in DC, I'm sure when Dr. Stevens was there, you knew of First Lady Mrs. Berry, nurturing that. What is your experience of women with winning, given that you are that generation that was there and part of what Miss Berry has taught?
So yes, definitely winning with women, just being at Howard and being on campus in that political environment, it actually taught us how to advocate for ourselves. I mean, I've sat in on just so many presentations and just workshops with dynamic women who were in the DC area, like just fighting to improve the rights of women as a whole. And so to sit here and hear that that's like has escalated into this moment, and to have like my soror and fellow Howard alum, Senator Harris, like be on the ballot, that's momentous. And to have that support, because, you know, I've traveled the world as an epidemiologist. I've been in some small villages in Africa and all that. And the sentiment is that Black American women don't support each other. And then when you look at, you know, the reality TV shows and that's how they see us. But to hear, you know, Ms. Cora Masters Berry talk about how these women came together with no agenda, like nothing formal, just to say we support this Black woman and we want her to be in this position is major. And so for the generations, you know, coming up now, to see that collective effort, to see how the women came together, it's powerful and it's momentous. And it just really sparked something in me to say, okay, we need to keep this going. It's beyond this moment. Like, as we talked about earlier, we have to be forward thinkers, and we have to go beyond this moment. And so, okay, so we've supported this woman, we've raised this money, our voices have been heard. So what's next? And so it's up to the younger generations to take the reins and say, okay, sit at the feet of, you know, these older women, such as like Miss Cora Masters Berry, and say, okay, what do we do now? What's next?
Ashley, what would you say you've learned from a Cora Masters Berry? What have you learned when you interact? What is it that she is pouring into you? Because it's rare that we get someone who really doesn't have to still give. What have you learned, Ashley, from even being around a sage, a vessel that has been a real Black Panther who can say Stokely Carmichael's name and know his name? What has that been like?
It's been amazing. I've learned so much. Her well of knowledge is so deep and immense. Even from learning more history about how many women actually helped the Million Man March. We actually did a special on it a few weeks ago, and it was amazing to just learn that information that I never would have known if I didn't know Mrs. Masters Berry. And I'm so thankful to have a direct connection with her so that I can enrich myself in more history, especially in a time like this where we have a Black woman as the potential vice president-elect.
Yes, and that's to tell my age. I was at Howard during the Million Man March, and I worked on some of those committees and helping to organize. So that's major, like, you know, and
Yes.
to actually talk about that, like to witness that, and that pushed me and that fueled me to like want to do better and to like just really pour back into my community. So
Exactly.
yes,
So
absolutely.
it's definitely an honor
Yes.
to be on screen with you right now, Mrs. Berry.
Yes, absolutely.
When you think of it, Miss Berry, and you think of Stokely, and you think of the women that have been in the movement, now that we all know that women were always there and actually the backbone and many times organizing so that the men didn't fall on their face, what would you suggest to these young women that they do now? Like, what is their moment as you continue? What will you hope for them? What do you want them to take away from this, Miss Berry?
Well, you know, you always end your story by saying you don't have to be in the street, but you have to stay in the struggle. I would tell them to stay in the struggle. And let me tell you what I mean by that. It is so easy when you're younger to be in the struggle because you're trying to find your way, trying to find your niche. But many of us, once we find our way and find our niche, we forget where we came from. We close the door behind us. We don't reach back. We don't evaluate and judge and critique our environment through a lens of race. I say if you're going to live a healthy life, you should look through life with your lens of race. And I'm scared of our young people not realizing what that means. And that doesn't mean you're racist, but at the end of the day, you are Black. And that is the way you should look at things. Because that, by the way, if you don't look at it, I always tell young people, you can say life, you can say color doesn't matter, that you're there on your own, blah, 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 blah. You can say that. But when you walk in that room, they see you as Black. And if you don't see yourself as Black, you're already behind in the game. So to continue to stay in the struggle, whatever the issues are that confront our people, confront us as women, you stay involved in that. Don't get so comfortable and so secure that you forget that the struggle continues. And I think that makes a great big difference in where you end up. But the most important thing is never forget that you're there so that you can bring somebody along with you.
I love that, and there's nothing new under the sun, and that you know, I think the legacy of us is to reflect and recognize the greatness that women like you, but also know your history. Like, do not think. I mean, when you even think of Cora Masters Berry, your mother ran for president. So this is something that she believed in, and it was so that we could see this moment of Kamala Harris. So, what is that like to even have Lenny just say, "You've got to be here"?
I'm sorry, what is the thing you just asked? What was the last thing you said?
I said, you know, given that your mother ran for president, what did that instill in you?
All right. I know this is going to sound so far ahead of her time. My mother was flipping houses in the 50s. We lived in one place that we didn't own, and that was the projects. When we moved from Oklahoma to California, we lived in the projects because she had a degree, but the people in California said she had it from a Black college, which was Langston University. So she had to go back for a year and get some certification. And when she came back, we stayed in the projects until she could earn a living that she wanted to earn. And from that point on, she was moving in houses, living in them a couple of years, flipping them. I mean, that was what she did. So by the time she ran for president, and oh, by the way, she put all 6 of her kids through college and then went back and got her master's degree and then went back at the age of 68 and got her PhD. So by the time she started running for president, I mean, it was like nothing new under the sun. She was just way ahead of her time, but it did have an impact on me because my mother was courageous and fearless. And she taught us all the time, never be afraid of what's in front of you, be afraid of what's behind you. So I guess I am my mother. You know, everybody says my mother's name is Isabel and they call me Isabel Light. Now, if anybody can call me Light knowing me, you have to imagine what my mother was like. She was ferocious.
I think that's so cute. But we need to say her name. We haven't said Shirley Chisholm's name on this evening. We know that Shirley Chisholm was not welcome. We know that Shirley Chisholm actually suffered as she paved this road that we're on today. For you ladies, what other names, including Shirley Chisholm, should we be saying during this moment of power for women?
If you're talking about women of history, are you talking about contemporary? Because if you're talking
I
about
think we can
contemporary,
say all the names anybody knew. I think we should definitely say some historical names because they need to say their name so that our community can know. Each of you can choose a few names because I think we've got to always acknowledge the ancestors. We've got to also acknowledge those who.
well, right, I have to go in a few minutes. So let me just call out the name of Ida B. Wells and Sojourner Truth. Those are some bad sisters. And then we bring it all the way up to Barbara Jordan and of course Shirley Chisholm and of course Dr. Isabel Masters. But as we face what we are facing now and watching in the history, one of the things that people don't realize that people don't really get great until they die. But in their life, their greatness shines through. And to say what you want, I would say that Maxine Waters has been a Trojan and a fighter and has spoken up and been courageous regardless. I think about her. I think about her contribution. I think about people like, well, people who have suffered a lot, like Stacey Abrams, who should have been governor of Georgia, and they just stole the election from her. You know, and then I can bring it all the way up to people who are entrepreneurs, Black women who people don't give enough credit to. People like Kathy Hughes, you know, who has just been awesome. And it's not always the ones who's in the battle on the street, but you're in the battle. As she said, her job is to inform Black people. I think anywhere you find a Black woman who keeps in front of her the Black agenda, she's a hero. And of course, my contemporary in real time person is, wait for it, Miss Tamika Mallory. She's at the top. She puts herself and her life on the line and she fights for her people and she goes wherever she feels we need her. So I think we've got a good tradition, a good lineage, and we have people like Joe Taker Eddy and Melanie Campbell. It's Black women, they just get it done. I'm just proud to be a Black woman in America today. So with that, I want to thank both of you. I think we're going to elect tonight the next Black president of the United States, because that's really how I look at the election. We're voting on the next Black president of the United States, and it's going to be a woman, and her name is going to be Kamala Harris. That's the victory I'm claiming tonight.
Well, you've called it. We'd like to thank you for tuning in. My co-host, Nothing New Under the Sun, Miss Cora Masters-Berry. Thank you so much for tuning in from DC. Much love to you. Love you. And thank you so much. If you get bored, you can check back with us, but we'll be right here. So stay safe,
all right,
stay down, and stay strong. And stay strong.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
All right. What are the names for you, Ashley? A couple names of women who are definitely part of the movement that you admire.
I would definitely have to go with Ida B. Wells. Definitely a strong soldier, just in the battlefield, in the streets, in the struggle every single day, reporting to our community and the media. And then I would go also with contemporary, maybe like a Tamika Mallory, a Barbara C. Jordan. Those are all names that really stand out to me as far as being active in politics. And of course, Kamala Harris.
Dr. C.
Yes, I have Susan Taylor. I had the opportunity of just hearing her speak and last year, and it's like she's magical, and she's really doing a lot as far as like her mentoring program for youth. And so she's actually building, and seeding into the future, as I like to call it, when they're working with youth. And then Zernona Clayton. She has been a force here in Metro Atlanta. Just hearing her story, just had the opportunity to just sit at her feet and just listen to like some of her stories from like the civil rights movement and all of that. So probably two that most people wouldn't really, say, but they have definitely been impactful in the movement.
When you
Of course.
say Zenona Clayton, many of these women that you talk about resurrected institutions. So even after the civil rights movement, you think about it, and it may not be on the top of minds, but there are tons of people that had never been given an award till she started the Trumpet Awards.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about, Dorothy Height and the women at National, Council of National Women, it's a whole movement that still lives today. When you think of Bethune-Cookman, for me, Mary McLeod.
Mary McLeod Bethune.
Yeah, Mary McLeod Bethune. These women built institutions.
Mm-hmm.
Like at the end of the day, they had a vision for souls that would pass through hallways that they would not see her, but they would actually become something special for their community to walk through. So I think these are institution builders. I think they are also people who seed inside of others seeds of greatness. So I really like the women that you chose. I think even in this lifetime, obviously the Oprahs, the Ava DuVernays, who continue to chronicle. And then Michelle Obama gave us so much on a different level. I think that it really changed the dynamic of women who are able to maneuver and see hope in a first lady. I mean, we have always had to just accept, oh, maybe not, but no, it was maybe so. And she was a phenomenal one. And, you think about those moments, and I hear people, if you had not had a child during the 8 years and you were at least connected to the White House, then your child could walk and run on the Easter egg hunt, or you could go in the White House and actually make it in. I think, many have not made it to that moment. For those who don't know, obviously South Carolina is coming in and want to make sure that we have an idea. We wanted to at least shout out the women at this moment who are and have made and are making a difference. We know that there is a huge effort. South Carolina is coming in. Obviously, it has a huge Black population. Jamie is in the lead. Lindsey Graham still doesn't want to let go yet. Warnock is 30 to 28 for Loeffler, and Biden has 85 electoral votes and Trump has 35. It is only 8:19 here, but from Chicago, we've got Eddie Lamar coming on. Eddie?
Peace. How's everybody doing?
Well, we want to make sure we had somebody from the Midwest coming in. Eddie, everybody is our city manager from the Midwest. Eddie, Dr. Kenyatta Stevens and Ashley, our millennial here. For Rolling Out, it is always a bridge community. And we do not want our community to, at a moment during a pandemic, to not know that we are in a pandemic. But Eddie, what do you think of this current temperature for the community? How are we feeling and how is Chicago?
There's a lot of anticipation and anxiety in the air, and I think that's pretty much shared across the nation. The voting numbers are through the roof when it comes to participation, and I actually visited a few polling places this morning, and the lines were surprisingly not long. I mean, I think this had a lot to do with a lot of the mail-in votes and the early voting when the lines were longer. But with respect to that, I mean, just generally, it's just everybody is pretty anxious. The texts that I've been getting this evening are people who are really just kind of biting their nails. People are having drinking parties, all of these types of things to kind of to calm their nerves. But I'm hopeful, and I think that's where we are in Chicago right now, just in a hopeful space. Except just learning that Trump they said Trump won Indiana, but that was almost.
And that was old, and that wasn't any place that we thought, given his vice president is from Indiana, and I traveled through Indiana a couple of times, and nobody's wearing a mask there, so right. That is not a surprise. But when you think about it, obviously Vermont is done. Delaware, Biden wins those. So no surprises yet. I think everybody is talking about where our neighbors, next to Illinois, when you think of Wisconsin, when you think north, when you think to the east, and you think of Michigan, what is Michigan, Ohio gonna do? Florida was too tight to call, so that's not a surprise, and Trump spends a lot of time down there. So not surprising. Can we get back some of the Midwest? Can we pull in a little bit? This is Rolling Out, a seat at the table. I am joined by Ashley. She is a producer on our morning show, and she is a Tuskegee graduate. We are so proud that she is here. She represents all the millennials in the community. Eddie, obviously, there in Chicago, and then Dr. Kenyatta Stevens. I was saying, Dr. Stevens, we do not want the community to not understand that they need to vote for themselves when it comes to this pandemic. And many people think that we're not talking about the election. But if you don't live through this moment, you will not be able to vote in another election. So we need to really edit our behavior. So for many will wonder, why do you have an epidemiologist? If our health is not the first thing we're thinking about as it relates to a political and social priority, we are lost, Eddie. You've made some changes, Eddie, during this period. And what would you think that your changes and why now?
Well, so just to be very transparent, during the, as this pandemic spread and all the anxiety and the panic that I was fearing, I put on at least 15 to 20 pounds, just straight out. Uber Eats was my best friend. All I was doing was worrying and eating and worrying. It was like I was going on a date with worrying every day, right? So, but anyway, there was one day where I woke up and I was just tired, but I don't know what I was tired from. I was just exhausted. And on that specific day, and I couldn't move like I usually move. So on that specific day, I decided, okay, look, it's time to hit this trail and just get active, And since then, it was myself and a few of my friends. We formed a group called the Tribe Called Fit, where basically we do an early morning walk to catch the sunrise, real early, like 5:30 in the morning, to catch the sunrise and just really get fit and have some fellowship and do this together. And it was necessary, not only for my physical health, but for my mental health and my spiritual health, just really getting in touch with who I am and getting myself to a place where I'm not breathing like I just ran a marathon walking up a flight of stairs,
Well, social media, we want you to ask Dr. Kenyatta some questions, Eddie some questions about what's happening. And Dr. Kenyatta, what do we need to know about changing our health protocol right now?
Ooh, that's these loaded questions, Monson. The first thing,
I just think we got to be honest. I think when I'm here talking about Eddie, I remember walking with Eddie a while back. I think movement is important. I think you've got to have a movement goal. I think the KPIs, key performance indicators, I think you and I went back and forth. I think we don't have any. And I'm not certain we're coming out with all of the changes, Dr. Stevens. You and I have been together the last 6 months, but 7 months now. And literally what's new? I mean, like, it is not, nobody has 10,000 steps in any rhyme. Like, and everybody's supposed to be so woke. I'm like, how are they woke, doctor?
They're woke in social media posts about being woke. That's exactly what's happening because there's no action behind the words. And so when we look at these COVID numbers, especially in the Black community and other minority communities, like they're still high. And because we still have those pre-existing conditions, the Black community, minority communities have had 7 months to walk their way to better health. It's just simple as walking. You don't have to join a gym. You don't have to do all stores were selling out of exercise bikes and all this stuff. And the only thing you need to do is go outside and walk and make sure you're getting fresh air. And that didn't happen. And so the result is about a month ago, the CDC updated the criteria for those pre-existing conditions. So the main one was if you are considered like morbidly obese, right? But now they're seeing that if you're just overweight, not even obese, if you're just overweight, you are at higher risk of getting COVID. And not just looking at the Black community per se. When we look at America as a whole, the entire nation is what? Overweight. So we're all at risk. And that has been downplayed so much. And not just like as a whole across the nation, but specifically in Black communities. And we're putting our trust in venues and people who are trying to recover from their economic loss at the beginning of the pandemic. Just because something is open doesn't mean that it's safe.
Right.
So you're putting yourself at risk. And then my friends that work in hospitals, the ER nurses and things like that, and they're saying, not only that, y'all, and I'm just going to put that out here, the STDs are skyrocketing in the Black community. So
During COVID. So we're not just not wearing masks.
We're wearing, right.
Wow, that is amazing. That's really concerning.
Well, but some of that might also have to do with unemployment. Some of that might have to do with people making agreements and participating for dollars in exchange. And we can't not think about that, because that's a reality for many people in the community. How are they going to earn income when they've been unemployed and may never have got an unemployment check? So,
but you still have to live to see it, because certain things you can't get rid of.
Well, I think you've talked about it often, the normalization of chronic disease in our community. The fact that we should be talking about it and would have made it a much more political issue. I think the, selfish thought is part of it. I think when we say 10,000 steps, because when you talk about walking, 10,000 steps, and more importantly, I would say even than that, because if you can't walk fast, that's cool. I would say if you just exercise an hour a day,
right,
15 at a time.
Exactly, and I think that's what's really discouraging to the Black community. They're saying, well, I don't have an hour, like I have this and the third, 10 minutes here, 15 minutes there. It all adds up, and so we have to get beyond the excuse stage for advocating for our own health.
Agreed. I think it just comes to a point where you make a decision that before anything happens in the world, you need to do something for yourself first. That moment that you step your foot on the floor, that those first 30 minutes or first hour of your day should be something that's getting you active, that's waking you up. I mean, again, I've been doing this for the past 4 months, and I can tell you, I'm a totally different person than I was 4 months ago. And this isn't to be preachy or anything like that. It just made a difference. And if you need somebody to go out with you, ask somebody to go out with you. There are people who'll do it, but our community does definitely need to get more active. The idea of 10,000 steps does sound daunting, when you first hear that number. But just think about how often we're just walking randomly to go random places.
But tips for me were this, I share with friends. Instead of taking half your phone calls sitting down, take half your phone calls walking in your house. So if you find yourself moving, it's all about the movement. And I think that is part of what and why I asked this question and why I appreciate Dr. Stevens coming on to really share with our community that this is a moment. Your health priority as public health That was not what we were hearing about with the Platinum Plan. Everybody was saying how much money we could make.
Mhm.
But it's not the money, y'all, if you can't enjoy it. It's not
Yeah.
the money if you're going to give it back to them. It's not the money if you're not going to enjoy retirement. It's not the money. You know, quality of life is important. And I think that as we all see, Eddie, the change is us setting goals as a community that are health focused as much as they are capitalistic focused.
Yes, agreed.
Dr. Stevens, what are some of the other chronic issues that we can actually change, that we can actually also connect to what we consider health policy, like eliminating the pandemic and infectious disease offices during this? Was that troubling to know, given that you worked in the area of Ebola?
Yes, absolutely. I was speechless because to have those key departments and key people in place when Ebola happened, right? And Ebola could have easily made it here to the United States. And I was actually on the Global Health Securities Initiative pilot that President Obama put in place for such a time as this, that was disbanded. And so to see this happening when it didn't have to, it's very disheartening to me, and to know that other countries were looking up to us from a public health standpoint, and for us to be number one and outpacing them in cases and deaths. I mean, it's being a public health practitioner, it really just blows my mind that that's where we are. But even just putting like the global nature or just a national nature of the pandemic and what we're going through aside, the minority communities are suffering at disproportionate rates. And that's because we were already behind the ball. So we already had everything that these doctors and the scientists were saying makes you more susceptible to COVID. So instead of us taking charge of that and saying, okay, what can we do? Everybody's working from home, outside is shut down. How can I improve my health just so I'm not dependent on medication, or I can improve my numbers? And that didn't happen. And I'm not really placing the blame there, because there's a mental health component too that kind of happened during that time, where people didn't know like how we were going to get out of this. But in the same token, that lack of self-awareness and just the motivation to be better and to take charge of your health, that was missing too, because most of the people, when I've done surveys and I look at the data, and they're saying like, what's the number one reason that, you don't exercise? Oh, I don't have time because I have a commute, or I'm working in the office. And so then all of that was given back to them, and it still didn't happen.
So we find ourselves in a election night, and everybody's wondering, what was the impact, do you think, Ashley, on a 50 Cent, a Lil Wayne, and a Ice Cube coming out in support of the Trump presidency?
I would say 50 Cent and Lil Wayne was despicable. Ice Cube, I would say, was more at least trying to hear somebody out and actually listening to see, okay, what is this plan about? What are you going to do for my people? I don't think there's anything wrong with hearing somebody out or even advocating for yourself, especially since, that person is the current president, and seeing what their potential plan is. I know that's an unpopular opinion, but that's how I feel about it. I can understand with Ice Cube. 50 Cent and Lil Wayne, however, I just think that 50 Cent did, do some backpedaling and denounce his endorsement of Trump, but Lil Wayne is completely despicable. Like, he has came out and said other things that I thought were despicable as well. But it's no pass. Like either you're with the community or you're not.
All right. Same question.
I agree with Ashley to an extent, but I think that when you take on this role, especially with this current sitting president, of hearing him out or just wanting to know what a plan is, what he ascribes to that is that you're talking, or you're representing the entire race or the entire minority population. And that's not the case. We saw what happened with Chrisette Michele when Steve Harvey, when he went to do the same thing, and people have forgotten that. Like, Ice Cube isn't the first person to do this. However, what we can take from that is that these people are economically driven, and I don't think they really have any vested interest in the Black community as a whole. They just want your
Ice Cube though?
Ice Cube is making money, honey. Don't get it twisted. So he thought that would put him in a position to where, with some of these other holdings that he has that are with friends of Trump. So that's where people didn't go. Follow the money.
I don't know if that's the case. I mean, he clearly created a plan, the contract with Black America, to address issues dealing with our people. And he reached out to both sides and they responded to him. And he received backlash for talking to the sitting president. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, to be totally honest with you. I think that if you're going to speak your truth, why not speak that truth through power? Who's in power at that specific time? Nothing's moving. It's not going to move. The way that it was framed, and we always have to be very cognizant of who's telling the story, because even if you see how the meeting was announced, it was announced by Trump's team via Twitter. Ice Cube didn't announce that, and they announced it in their way, thus setting the narrative for what people took it to be as. But it wasn't that. What really disappointed me was that a lot of us who were jumping on Cube hadn't even read the plan. They weren't even aware that a plan was created, that he actually sat with two professors, spoke with Dr. Claude Anderson, who spent his time in the White House with Jimmy Carter. He's getting professional opinions, drafting up this plan for us, and we're attacking him. So even him in comparison to 50 Cent and Lil Wayne, there's no comparison. It's not the same thing, not even close. They're not bringing anything to the table but their fame or whatever they represent. But Ice Cube clearly was bringing something to the table. And what it should have done, what I don't think it did do, was lead people to read these plans that both parties have for our interests. So the Lift Every Voice plan from the Democratic Party and the Platinum plan from the Republican Party. These are things that we need to, we should have been reviewing these earlier on. What conversation was had with President Obama? Did anybody present anything to him? Did it happen then? I think it should happen now. I think now was just as good a time as any time.
I think for me, and I'm not agreeing with anybody here on the panel, I don't have a problem. I have a problem with lack of transparency. I think that from all the way from Jay-Z and NFL to anybody asking in secret for my community, I want representatives of industry, of trade in those rooms so that we all can be honest and collectively win. I'm not interested in anybody's platinum plan that is not reviewed by some of the best thought leadership in industries affected. I don't want you negotiating with the NFL when you're not a negotiator and you can't write a legal binding contract. You have no fiduciary duty to be honest and represent your client. I feel the same way when you think about, once again, it suggests to young people that entertainers actually negotiate business contracts of a magnitude of an entire nation, entire race. So I think that's it speaks poorly to all of the other Black economists, Black PhD holders in economics, sociology, Black bank presidents. I think that we really need to speak to the transparency of, are you really working in all of our interest, or is it once again, you're the special Negro that will get the special deal? And I say Negro because at that point, it's just the money. They don't care. They print money every day. And they, the slave trade had African-American traders. So we need to really understand that we have traded in each other all the time. When you think of the loss and assassinations of many of the individuals that were not popular political figures, that they've ultimately put on stamps, that there were other brothers who turned their backs and turned them in. And historically, for most movers and shakers of time and change, that's it. So for me, I have a transparency issue. I'm not, if it's not a collective agenda and we can't all say we feel safe about your negotiations because we saw it in advance, and that you didn't go in by yourself, and that you actually took someone that we believe in and we understood what was on the agenda. Because that to me is the missing molecule. Like, the defective gene is collective economics, collective everything. Not how much and what you can make to entertain me, but what can you make so that we can sustain our own selves? And that's part of what I think this election represents. Last but not least, Ashley, what about Mr. Kanye West on the ballot? Now nobody's talking about it tonight.
Well, he may be my cousin. My name is Ashley West. I have mixed feelings about Kanye.
First King James, but okay.
Probably another unpopular opinion. Up until about 4 years ago, I have always been a huge Kanye West fan. And it's really hard to see him kind of going out like this. I'm just gonna leave it there. I'm gonna leave it there.
I'm gonna pick it up.
Okay.
So there's this new social media app. I don't know if you guys are aware. It's called Clubhouse.
Yes.
So awesome. So it's essentially, for those who don't know what it is, basically individuals are coming on there, creating these rooms, and they're having live conversations, and not typing, but actually speaking to each other. So there was this one room where a gentleman, the name of the room was I voted for Kanye West, make me think different. So number one, just so I can get this out the door, I hope none of you voted for Kanye West. I do. I hope that. I'm a Kanye West fan. I love the brother. I support him. But in this election, it was not a good idea. And writing his name down, it's not going to be counted. These are just things that, that don't make sense. Now, with that being said, the kind of conversations that were happening in this room were just enlightening. So if Kanye doing this inspires a younger generation to become more politically involved, then he's accomplished something. What he's doing now, what's interesting is that he posted a video of himself casting his ballot. And what's so Kanye is that this 40-year-old man who had never voted any time in his life, the first time he ever votes, who does he vote for? Himself. No. That's the most Kanye thing ever, right? Mm-hmm. But what's even more interesting about his ballot was that he voted for himself, but he also didn't cast any votes for any propositions, any judges, any other thing that directly affects his community immediately. None of those votes were cast. So we really have to think about this cult of celebrity and what it means to our community, who we take seriously, and what kind of gravity we provide to them with respect to certain things that involve our lives.
Now, I guess I'll piggyback off of Eddie. I too was a Kanye West fan before he went off his meds, and I just think that this is definitely a mental health issue. I mean, it's being played out on social media, of course, but like the narcissistic, like he's a narcissist, in which we all know. And but unfortunately, when you have the younger generations that follow him that don't really see the mental health breakdowns that are occurring, and they think it's like, he's just making these grand gestures, and this is just what a genius does, and everything like that. And it's like, no, he needs mental health assistance at the end of the day. And that goes back to what Monson and I were talking about as far as the Black community. There's a mental health component that's missing, and there's so many people walking around with mental health issues that are under the radar. They are functioning at a capacity where they're holding it together, but once they break. And as we've seen played out, depending on who you are. So we know, I mean, I doubt if in one of Kanye West's episodes that if the police were called, they would shoot him, right? But
anything can happen.
I mean, I'm just saying, I'm just putting that out there, given that, he's on the Kardashian side too. But when you look at the average Black person that goes through a mental health episode and the police are called, what's the result?
So Dr. Stevens, let me ask you this then. When we talk about, because I think Kanye was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about that disorder and how it presents itself, in that specific person, that same disorder, and I kind of want to shy away from calling it that, the same thing that makes us say Kanye needs to get on his meds are the same thing that allows him to accomplish all of these great things that he set out to do. So I'm wondering, are we approaching this properly? Are we approaching it as a sickness, or how are we really approaching this?
I mean, any type of chemical imbalance where you go off the deep end and you have no control of your behavior is a problem. And the fact that fuels his creativity is not uncommon, because some of the greats in history had some type of mental health disorders, like can't think of it, like somebody used to eat their own hair. I mean, it's crazy stuff. Mm-hmm. But we have to call it for what it is, because it's not seen as fuel for creativity when it's displayed out on social media and in the public. Mm-hmm. So what happens is, as people see these tirades, it actually will give someone an excuse, like if something happens and he, kind of goes off the rails or whatever, and they do something to him, then they can say, well, he was having a moment and I couldn't control him. Right. So you have to look at it from that point of view too. Yeah, on one hand, when it's controlled, it fuels his creativity and he's a creative genius. But on the other hand, when it's not controlled, it makes him a threat to himself and others. Because he did say something about, if I die, the suicidal thoughts. Mm-hmm. And sometimes when that happens, particularly on the creative genius level as Kanye, they take everybody with them because of that narcissism aspect. I'm not going to leave anybody behind because I'm, like they think they're the end all be all to their family's existence. So that's when you have these murder suicide type situations and the whole family's gone. When you look at some of these cults and how they take out, like the leader, once he knows he's about to be caught and goes to jail, it's like, okay, drinks Kool-Aid. And that's what we see.
This is not to say that Kanye is running a cult or anything.
No. Right. No. I'm saying that.
He's just running for president.
We're just saying like right. How, the current sitting president is a narcissist. And we've seen him go off his rails.
So let's talk about that then. So, I mean, have you seen moments where and I'm talking realistically, like, have you seen moments where you're like looking at him like, okay, that's a signal of something, and these type of things? Like, what was there? You know, what's there?
And so you can see the highs and lows when they show clips of him at his rallies and he's dancing and he's trying to basically connect and calling rappers name wrong and all that kind of stuff, and trying to just really, and it's not that he's trying to associate with Black culture or appropriate in any kind of way. It's just like that surge has hit him, and then he thinks he's here. And then you go on the flip side and he's, you know, telling people to, you know, stand down, stand up, stand around, walk around, you know, all that kind of stuff. And then just to watch his behaviors, like in like the debates, and I'm a watcher, and I was just looking at just some of his hand movements, his facial movements, and he really fought, not just, especially with the last one, he fought to keep from coughing because, you know, he was still COVID positive, but that's a whole nother story. But he just really fought to contain himself because he's a entertainer. He's not used to being contained. And that has taken more out of him given his age than anything that I've witnessed. So, and then it turns into now he's a habitual liar. Which is also a mental health issue. But, you know, they're saying, well, he's a liar. I'm like, but it just goes with all of the other attributes that he has, like, that are mental health issues.
Well,
and, I mean, the man says he's in perfect health.
Well, yeah.
And, you know, and then with the West Point scenario, when he couldn't even walk down the steps and couldn't hold the glass of water and had to use it, you know, it's just like different things like that. But he won't take, when you have someone that doesn't take responsibility for their actions like that, but they're responsible for a nation, it's scary.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's where we are. Sad, but true.
Well, it might not be where we are. I don't know if any more results came in.
Currently.
I think the results are in, and I think the conversation we are having, particularly when Dr. Stevens says watching, the races, obviously Ohio's there, obviously we're still waiting, Texas is still coming in, so you still have those. But I just wanted to say on a pop note, that all of this played a role in what we talked about. And I think that for me, it's social sabotage. Like we have taken celebrity worship to a point where we don't even have any collective thought or economic agenda for our community that everybody can repeat, like they can repeat some rap lyrics. And to me, that's when it's a despicable moment in our community. When rap lyrics trump Black economics. Like literally we can't focus on how many of our community needs to be hired at these major corporations. We spend our time on their social platforms and we're still accepting excuses for hiring practices. And then when we talk about, Eddie, Clubhouse, my question to all people as it relates to Clubhouse is it's not a Black-owned platform.
It's not.
So we're sitting there making it cool, giving it our audio, giving it our time, and yet everybody makes the excuse that that's what we do. That sounds like self-hate at the nth degree, rationalized through bougie, I've arrived, but my community doesn't have to dialogue. I mean, that's what it sounds like to me. And it sounds unfortunate that we would even celebrate and think that there's some rationale for not supporting our sister. The one thing that I will say is that we didn't fall in line. Like all the things, Ashley, that I want you to always hear so that you always understand that if a brother votes for himself and he don't vote for you, he might hate Black women. He might have mother issues. He definitely has Black women issues. And so for me, Eddie, as a older brother, there was no way that I was going to vote against my sister and rationalize it for the others. And that's what that was. At the end of the day, nobody wanted to say it. Nobody wanted to take and say what it really meant gender basis. We wanted to excuse it. We wanted to go find this history of 1993. But in 1993, we were still listening to R. Kelly.
And they was doing drive-bys.
No, but I'm just saying. I'm just trying to. I wasn't even gonna take it to the drive. I'm just saying we hadn't even culturally. We were willing to tolerate, and then all of a sudden something very unpleasant happened. We tolerated popular men canceling a Black female vice president. We tolerated it. And we rationalized it.
Yep.
Like, really? You really voted against Black women? You really came out against Black women? Because that's what that is, no matter how everybody rationalizes it tomorrow. You voted against Black women. You positioned yourself against Black women. And that made me very, unfortunately, emotionally sad that we could rationalize being against Black women. And people rationalize and still want to offer passes when that's the only truth in the room.
All right, I'm with you.
But that's just me. I mean, I just think there was a woman hating clause that was passed around during that. I think that's what that was. You know, I think, oh, we don't have any testosterone. We're not on the ticket. We're going to be anti-Black women and anti-anything else, but I'll be about me. And that's what we saw. And we should call it what it is. But we're afraid to, because I won't get invited to be a member of the clubhouse. I won't get invited to walk the red carpet. And for most people to walk the red carpet, they also walk the plank.
Wow.
And also, you know, just to throw this in here, that hatred for a Black woman, period, or just a woman in general, it's narcissistic, because I don't see anybody that looks like me in basically in race or gender. So I'm just gonna throw the whole thing away.
Exactly. And that was more of my concern, that in all of that, the discussion about how we were moving forward to vote and support Black women didn't even make the discussion when people were really asking, why didn't you? Why weren't you supporting Black women? Why didn't you fall in line?
Well, yeah, there were 10,000 questions when she was a candidate for president.
Yes.
No, but I'm saying even beyond that. Now there's no question. Here is the ticket. This wasn't, we were all past that vetting part. We passed the vetting, and you're literally gonna say that you're willing to take an L to hope for a W for somebody else when you could just fall in line. What does that say about who we are, Ashley? When the people that you're talking about didn't support Black women to the nth degree, sisters to win in this case?
I don't know if it's that they don't necessarily support Black women. I just think that they don't see themselves in politics. They don't see what voting will change for their community or for themselves individually. I really don't think it's anti-woman or anti-Black woman especially.
And that was my point. So the rationalization continued like this and similar with R. Kelly's music.
No, it's completely different.
I don't know that it was. Is either you were for her or you were against Black women. She is Black women. So I think you had a choice. It wasn't, I don't think we can actually be, not if we're being honest. Can we, Eddie?
Yeah, I think we should be more honest. I think we should be brutally honest.
No, but I'm just saying, you either for Black women or you against.
Yeah,
You
I
were
agree.
voting for Pence.
I agree.
Wasn't another you that, and I think we just don't want to use that lens because then we'd have to really be honest about those individuals.
Of course. I think, but I think we should be as vocal about that as we are about this cancel culture. So if we really want to shed some light on the subject, we have to speak up about it. Kamala should have all of our support. Just bottom line, period.
But I found that it wasn't the conversation though.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see it as the dominant conversation that it was anti-Black woman.
But I see it as a lack of unity among the Black race as a whole, like as a family, because when we think back to the 60s and 70s, like if somebody in the community went to college, everybody rallied together, the church people, to make sure that person stayed in college. And I always liken it to like, my grandmother with me and my cousins, like if one fight, you all fight, you have to stick together no matter if it's your fight or not. And that's what was missing right now.
Well, to be fair, just to play the other side of this, there are a bunch of brothers right now who are just walking out of jail cells because of Kamala.
No, whatever crime they committed.
I'm just saying. I mean, they feel that way.
We want passes all the way down. Like we can't make, and I'm clearly not for any brother going to jail.
Right.
Any brother serving prison. But we can't literally say when we make these assessments that we all did not participate, or even the system already put you on a path to end up in prison. You're born into poverty. You're born in a situation where you can't move ahead. You're born where, if you think about half the movies on some of these shows now are all about drugs. And I cringe at the idea of thinking about how the showcase of business success is entertainment and drug dealing. So I'm not certain, Eddie. I don't think she walked up and said, you know what, I'm going to help you commit that crime and then I'm going to sentence you.
Well, I mean, she, amongst all of that, she chose to be a prosecutor, and who's being prosecuted?
No, but they were guilty. So, okay.
Are they always guilty?
I mean,
we talk about all of these situations and the case and why people become criminals and all that.
And then there's
this is somebody who comes from an HBCU. Clearly, she's learned. She knows who's going to jail. She knows what's happening. She chose to be a prosecutor.
Right, and I get that, and I'm not saying that. My point is, if they were guilty and she was prosecuting and she was the prosecutor, was she supposed to not do her job just because they were Black and she was Black? Because we can look at that to the reverse now.
No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying if she should be a prosecutor, she should very well do her job. And she did a great job.
But I'm saying it's the resentment because she was Black, a Black prosecutor?
Well, I don't have any resentment towards.
No, I'm not saying from.
But
you,
I'm saying just to play the other side of this. Yeah, you go to jail. Yeah, there's gonna be some resentment, of course.
But in the same token,
I mean, I liken it to this. So this may be kind of extreme, but I liken it to Samuel Jackson's character in Django. So, not to say that if a person is guilty that they shouldn't pay for their crime, but then again, also like, where does your loyalty lie?
But the same can be said about this election.
Exactly, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah,
for sure. I'm with you, but I'm just saying this is just to play the other side of it because that conversation wasn't had because who's at the top of the ticket? It's a white man at the top of the ticket as usual. Two 70-year-old white men are fighting for a position that in 20 years they won't even be here to even talk to our kids.
Right.
But they're setting policies and putting judges in place to take care of to speak to our kids' lives. This is a serious situation we're in right now.
But the crazy thing is the Black community doesn't realize that. They don't know the weight of when you have these sitting judges and who's chosen for the Supreme Court.
I was really frustrated with that whole process, and maybe I wasn't informed enough, but this very same thing happened when Obama was in office, and they literally blocked him from appointing a judge to the bench. And I don't understand how it was moved so quickly for this judge to get through.
It wasn't quick. At the end of the day, he didn't control the Senate.
Okay.
Like when you don't control the Senate, it really was a moot conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It was a nomination that was never going to be approved. The one thing they have shown in this election is that they can get every agency to fall in line. And my point to our community was we couldn't get us to fall in line.
Agreed.
And then not only did we not fall in line, we fell out based on gender. And so when I think about us falling out on gender, it is so horrible that we would see a Black woman in a position to do so much more for us. And as Black men, we would come out loud and proud and be men of accomplishment who have no excuse because they're not going to need a government handout.
Right.
So for me, I was very confused, and I'm just asking the audience, I'm asking you here, why would you come out against Black women at this moment, social media? Why would we tolerate our celebrities coming out against Black women at this moment?
Why are we putting our business in the street? As this is like family business. So that's something that should be handled not in the public. Absolutely. This wasn't a time or place. Because the health of the Black nation is definitely at risk. And COVID is not sparing anybody.
And what can we do to all get on the same page going forward, especially politically?
Well, I think
because they've made the health of Black people a political issue. And because COVID is killing minorities. And so that has been like the main thing that's in the forefront. But no one is saying how, other than a vaccine that we're not going to get this year, or probably not until summer 2021. So your businesses, you're still going to have to wear masks. The economy is still going to, be tanking.
Your president said 6 weeks.
From when?
The last debate, didn't he say 6 weeks?
Christmas 21.
How many?
What do you say, Ms. Davis?
Well, I have so many thoughts on this topic. The first is two things really important. Number one, there's a concerted effort to undermine the relationship of Black men and women in this particular election cycle. So we should not just take it as though, the magnitude of resources and forces that were pulling on Black men, that was significant. But there was a little crack that could be exploited, and it was. So Black women organizing over time realized this and did all that we could to support our brothers, to have conversations, to keep that crack from getting any wider, because it was not just within our community. If you think back to some of the drivers, come on, Kanye, even young people were like, we don't listen to Kanye on politics. And Cube hasn't been at the table. And where is this rift coming from? But that was exploited, and there were just too many in the ready. And then there are the folks in this era that believe that economic interest trumps everything. And I use that trump intentionally. And to me, it's sad when someone is low income, but for somebody to be really affluent, that is just vile. So we have all of that in the mix. And as a community, we really never galvanized around Kamala Harris the way we did, say, for an Obama. And that was intentional. They wouldn't have probably had a chance if she had to have a real strong Black Lives Matter tail attached. So if you look at how that went, it was kind of low key. And I think Black women were very sophisticated. And I kind of sort of forgive our brothers this time because millions of dollars were spent to divide us.
So are you saying that it was brothers that that the lack of our support is what didn't push Kamala over the top for a presidential candidate?
No, not at all. I'm saying after that. So in that kind of interim, as soon as she was the pick, money was poured into separating Black men and women. Because as much as they say in South Carolina, Jim Clyburn, he put his finger in the air and caught the wind of where Black women were. And people say, oh, how did that happen? Black women all along were making an analysis. And we knew the only person that stuff wouldn't stick to, that folks couldn't come up with a catchy little nickname and you couldn't tear apart, any of those other candidates wouldn't work. So we waited and we weighed in South Carolina. And Jim Clyburn got to be a voice and get a whole lot of credit. It was Black women that carried that through. Mm-hmm. And then we wanted to present America with a choice. You can choose this or you can choose that. And Black men will come around with what white women do and Black women and white women. That's not, sisters are together. We are together enough to pull our brothers together because we are on one accord. We sing with one voice, we step, it didn't matter, AKA Delta or nothing at all. We were rock solid. And it wasn't a question, do you like her? Do you like this? Prosecutor, this, progressive, not progressive? It didn't matter. She looked the most like us. And so she was our pick. For us, it was simple. Mm-hmm. And after all these years, really, we really would say, hello, as much as Obama could do. And, we had a request. We wanted that Supreme Court pick. Mm-hmm. So we didn't see RBG. We didn't see that happening. And we got a commitment even when Harris was selected. Black women say, well, that's great. We want to have her, and we still want our Supreme Court pick.
And I like what you said. I like that you said you had a request. And we should have the audacity to make a request of all of our elected officials. I'm with you, for sure.
Definitely.
I love the fact that we were talking about it, but I still believe that there is a issue. And I definitely believe that forgiveness is a practicable tool, but I do believe we have to do some analysis, some post visits to really talk, not in a sabotaging way to destroy our community, but we must definitely address the treatment of our sisters. I mean, I think we really, there are other issues, and I'm just saying trafficking as we think about it. I mean, let's not think that this agenda or our vote as a community. So Eddie, what I was really saying, in addition, is just Black men and women have to have a common agenda.
Of course.
You can't have an agenda that's, I can do something to your daughter as long as it's not daughter, it's not good. I can't. We were so pimping philosophy like that's still good. That's all bad.
Right.
Like that. That's something to cancel. That's it. You know, things like that. Those are the issues that are so post-traumatic syndrome from slavery. And then reparations. Like everybody has to be able to say the word. Like it literally has to be something you're posting on your social media.
Yeah.
You've got to get to reparations because the playing field is not equal. We clearly, then just give me a land grant. I don't care if you give me you can give me a couple of these national parks. Just whatever it is, just give me mine. I'll take some national parks. You know, or give me part of the ocean, whatever you want to give me. Like y'all got.
Cash and land
You know,
payments.
right. But I just want a fair opportunity for my kind. See?
Well, you know, that's my deal when it comes to HBCUs. As much as government this and alumni that, if Ivy League institutions started endowments selling anybody that looked like or might have been related to me, if Harvard is sitting on a $40 billion endowment, I'm with Robert Smith, 2%. 2% out of the endowments of the institutions that made it on our very backs would transform education, and then our institutions would be economic engines and anchors in our community. So there's lots more. So, you know, you could have your national park. I want my several billion. And it's like I'm learning from Darity to say the T word. So it took me a long, you know, Black people had a hard time saying billion. You know, we had a difficult time saying billions. And once we got to say billions, then we moved to trillions. So
yeah, but I figured out where I want my national park. You know, near the oil. I want it near the oil. You know, someplace where I understand just like they understand. So we're not lost. I'm just saying there's a solution. You know, if you can't figure it out, I got to figure it for you. Since you can't figure it out, you don't know what to give me. I just take the land. We got some. You know, you made the parks and make it my party. And I just want us to have some rationale so that we all can think about it. I'm all about trillion. We saw them back the truck up already during this time, and all of a sudden major corporations got all the millions that they needed, and they put out $1 trillion. So we know that they can put out another $1 trillion. You just need to understand that it's for us. And that makes a lot of individuals uncomfortable when we talk about what we deserve from this country. And that includes, Eddie, many of us who don't understand we have to vote for ourselves in this country. We have to vote for ourselves. It's important. So the elect's going on. What's the latest, Dr. Kenyatta? I know you're keeping up with the states and the stats.
I don't know. I'm watching CNN, and so they're like upsetting me because they keep going to 2016, and I'm like, you know, they keep talking about Hillary like the current sitting president, and I'm like, but what are the numbers now? So it's still early, and I know we did get a question from social media. How can they predict the state won with so many absentee votes still pending? And that's just what it is, a prediction. So, and if they have received the majority of votes in, they can pretty much predict from that too. So I don't know where that question came from or who it was directed to specifically. But yeah, it's really kind of hard to tell. They're still looking at the crucial battlegrounds, and Georgia's looking real red right now. So yeah.
Well, I think they were hopeful in Georgia just based on what it is. Clearly, the attitude of Georgia and the very leadership of Georgia is very, 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 very red. And we've got to understand we still have work to do. I mean, we still have people that are unregistered. So we still know that there's lots for us to do. This is a moment we have to all make it through.
Yes. And no matter what happens, we still have to figure out how to reclaim our health as Black people, because our health has declined in the pandemic and lives have been lost.
I think so. Ashley, young people during this election, they led in the uprising. What do you anticipate your generation doing after this election, no matter who wins?
Hopefully standing together, uniting as one, and asking for real tangible benefits for Black people so that our offspring and our next generations can have something to move forward with financially as well as politically.
Eddie, what should the agenda for our community be the next 90 days after this election?
Our mental health, number one. I say that as a joke, but I also mean that seriously. Of course, our physical health, and then getting back into a position where we are understanding the economics of our community and how to get this dollar circulating, and how we make these dollars, and learning the technology, and learning that getting involved with the technology so that we're not wiped out. Getting more information about cryptocurrencies, so just in case reparations does come, if they kill a dollar, we'll have enough interest in this cryptocurrency so we can move forward. So for the first 90 days, like I said initially, our mental health and the economy.
So, Dr. Stevens, what do we take away from this election, and what should we do our next 90 days?
Next 90 days, we should be pandemic minded, because as I mentioned on the morning show, COVID-19 is looking real COVID-22-ish. And I'm joking, but I'm serious, because we haven't taken the necessary measures to actually remember when the whole flatten the curve, we need to flatten the curve. We didn't even come near the curve, okay? And so now we're in our third peak. So we're like this, like it never went down. And if we don't stop with all of this partying, especially in Atlanta and the clubs, and we having house parties, and folks are still having their COVID parties because they were like, well, if you have it, we'll all come over. I'm like, no, don't do that, because based on genetic makeup, you don't know how your body will respond to an infection. Your friend may get over it, but you still have people who haven't regained their sense of taste or smell.
Right.
They're still having issues breathing, lung issues. Some of them have permanent like heart issues months later. So we have to get beyond, oh, I'm relatively healthy, but you don't know, especially our young people, if you don't know what you're predisposed for anyway, you may not have it, and the COVID may be just that one thing that takes you out. And that's what we've seen. So we have to get ahead of this. We have to take a hold of our health. We have to be intentional about our living, which I haven't seen in the Black community right now. Like, we're just so bent on normal. Well, there's no such thing as a normal. There's not even going to be a new normal, because until we can get a hold of COVID, our life is going to be different, and things are going to be different. And whereas you have people in leadership now, they're saying like, I'm not going to do a mask mandate, and we're not going to have collective closings. Well, guess what? At the rate that we're going, they won't have a choice. Look at Europe. France is shut down. Look at Germany. And they actually flattened their curve. So let's think about that. So this is just their second wave, given that, it's winter and it's flu season. So for us with, this president with his grandiose boastings of us turning a corner, well, a corner to more COVID. That's where we're going, because it's not the end. And so I have been just advocating for the health of Black people, like public health, like we have to. And I keep saying voting is an act of a public health intervention, and an intervention is something that's put in place to mitigate the disease once it's there. So if we vote, and if we voted for those politicians that have put the health of the Black community and minority communities at large in the forefront, then that's the first step towards an intervention. Munson talks about KPIs. Well, the first thing we have to do is figure out how to build that trust in our community, because it's not there. And unfortunately, sources of truth have become social media. And just because rapper so-and-so throws a party at his house doesn't mean that COVID is over. And if club such and such is allowing people to come, that doesn't mean that they have put prevention measures in place. They don't care you wear a mask or not wear a mask, because they're going to be in their offices with their mask on and whatever other safety measures they have in place while you're down on the floor, exposing yourself to disease and possibly taking it back home to your loved ones.
Well, now you guys have the weather report as it relates to vote your health. More than anything, I want us to remember to vote for your community. We want to thank those who have been a part of all of this, a seat at the table. I want to thank especially Dr. Kenyatta Stevens for rambling with me as we kind of move through this whole maze to make sure that our community didn't think that they shouldn't be voting for health. I know for many, they thought this would be just politics. I tried to at least share some emotional disconnects that we have as a community as it relates to supporting each other. I want to thank Ashley for bringing the millennial perspective as it related to what we could expect and where we should be headed. And Eddie, our city manager from Chicago, a true soldier who really brought clarity and obviously mental health to the forefront. Obviously, that's an all around post-slave traumatic syndrome is real. Mm-hmm. No one wants to admit it. Mm-hmm. Everyone has some of it. Isabel Wilkinson talked about the cast. Mm-hmm. Clearly, they put a double cast on us because still people can vote against a Black woman knowing that her win is a win for all of us. So we really need to think about how we approach ourselves and how we see ourselves moving forward. I'm Munson Steed with Ashley West, Dr. Kenyatta Stevens, and Eddie Precise. I want to thank you all for coming on a seat at the table this evening. Thank you so much. You do not have to be in the streets, but you do have to be in the struggle. We'll see you tomorrow night when we'll talk about and dissect the reaction of the community to who is and who appears to be winning this election on this night. Thank you so much to you all. Thanks to my panelists for coming